Welcome to The Force of Thought with me, Ingrid Reeser. What healing could be made possible if we began to work in ways that honored our nervous systems? How could pleasure be a pathway to health? How can we have more true intimacy and eroticism in our lives? In this episode, I speak to body and trauma expert Kimberly Ann Johnson.
In order that we can repair anything, we always have to have some degree of ability to be present to things that feel good. And that could be the smallest thing, like that could be like the sensation of your fingers touching one another. It could be the light that's coming in on your face. It could be the memory of the smell of something. But we have to be able to, we have to come home to the body, and we have to have an ability to stretch out how long we can stay with something that's pleasurable.
Kimberly Ann Johnson is a sexological body worker, a somatic experiencing practitioner, yoga teacher, postpartum advocate, and a single mom. She has worked with thousands of women to heal from birth injuries, sexual boundary violations, and trauma. She is the author of several books, including the early mothering classic, The Fourth Trimester, and is the host of the Sex Birth Trauma podcast. I spoke to her on a sunny day in San Diego last summer. We talked among the avocado and fig trees of my father-in-law's garden, until a neighbor's wood chipping machine brought us inside. Would you like to just give a brief introduction to the work that you're doing so that people can understand a little bit about where you're coming from and how you came to be doing that work?
Sure. I think it's a little bit easier to maybe give a short chronology.
Do that.
I started off as a dancer and a yoga teacher and a body worker. I do structural body work. And then I had a baby and became a mom, and none of my practices were working the way that I thought that they should. And because of that, I had a lot of training, a lot of hours on the mat and on the cushion, and I kind of had a revelation like, wow, none of this really applied to being a woman. I thought that it did, and I thought that I kind of understood something, but now that I've gone through this rite of passage, really, it's not applying now. And so I also had a physical injury as a result of the birth, and I didn't want a full pelvic floor reconstruction surgically, which is what I told I needed. So I went on a path to try to heal myself without surgery. And along that path, many women told me their stories, and it was a lot of stories about pain and different situations people were in. And when I would say, well, when did it start? It started with their birth. And I realized that it was really, really inadequate, the kind of care that women were getting after having babies. And I've always been a bit of a rebel, so I didn't have specific pelvic floor training, but the things that people were talking to me about, I was like, I can do this because I work in the rest of the body, so we'll just figure this out. But then after I started working in the pelvis, I realized, okay, I need way more skills when it comes to tracking nervous systems, and I need way more skills when it comes to sexual shame and how to be in the pelvis with someone when there's just a lot that's happening there. So I went to school for somatic experiencing, and I went to school as a sexological body worker. And then I spent 3 years, and I did 800 hands-on, hands-in sessions. So I've had a lot of great training formally, but that was kind of my dojo where I met so many different circumstances of births, gynecological surgeries, deaths, miscarriages, incontinence, hemorrhoids, painful sex, and then a lot of sexual boundary ruptures. And out of that, I realized once I had really long waiting lists in all of the cities that I was working in, I realized like I need to be able to help people in a broader way, because I'm never going to be able to do this one by one, even if I do a practitioner training. So I formalized a practice that I called Activate Your Inner Jaguar, which was helping women go from a prey role to a predator role in their nervous systems, which happened to be the kind of key unlock in all of those pelvic, gynecological, and sexual things is basically like movements women couldn't make, words they couldn't say, self-protective mechanisms that weren't at their disposal at the moment that whatever rupture happened, and how I could do that in a more general way. So I've been teaching online classes on women's sexuality and spirituality, on the female nervous system for the last 8 years. And I still do a little bit of hands-on work. I've written a couple of books now based on those studies. And then I'm also a mom. So I have a daughter who's about to graduate from high school. And I've been a single mom most of this time. So that's a big part of my life.
Yeah. Could you just say something real briefly about the training, the somatic experiencing, and being a sexological body worker? What does that mean for people who don't know?
Well, a sexological body worker is kind of a new field, and it's essentially body work training that includes the genitals. It's one-way touch, so the practitioner is always clothed, usually gloved as if we're doing genital work, and the person who's the client is in the receiving role most of the time. So that's sort of our code of ethics. And then, because you probably notice, like if you go to get a massage, your like genitals are always draped. But if you go to get work on your genitals, that's like all you get. And so this is kind of a holistic practice, which it's very, we learn anal work, we learn penis work, we learn vulva work. I was going for something very specific, which is I learned all those things because the unshaming part is a really important part of the training. But I was really there because I knew I wanted to work with women and birth specifically. And then somatic experiencing is a training in working with trauma and trauma in the body. And the founder, Peter Levine, who lives nearby, he was one of the first people to observe that wild animals don't experience trauma, but humans and domesticated animals do. And so he studied that wild animal behavior to try to understand, well, what is it that's happening that's creating trauma in humans? And he observed how animals are able to complete full cycles in their systems. And so I learned from him. He's also a student of Dr. Rolf, I'm also a Rolfer. And so it's in that lineage as well, how to notice what are the incomplete patterns and how to help someone complete them. So an incomplete cycle, what do you mean by that? It can be, so it's hard to, like normally I would act this out and someone could see visually how it works. But if there's a hunt, for instance, there's a whole sequence of behaviors that the predator makes. And there's a whole sequence of behaviors that the prey does. And they're doing them involuntarily based on their physiology and biology, not based on a rational idea of it or a calculation. Their system is calculating. For instance, if there's a wolf hunting a rabbit, the rabbit is consciously or it's unconsciously calculating, could it actually escape once it knows it's being predated? And if it can't escape, then it will collapse and play dead. But not because it's thinking to do that, because its system is so overwhelmed that it goes into that complete collapse. For a human, that would be like evacuating your bowels or wetting your pants or just deer in headlights. So then if the predator continues and the wolf still wants the rabbit, even though the rabbit is playing dead and predators don't like dead animals, it will go over to the rabbit, pick it up by the scruff of its neck, shake it around, see if it believes that it's dead, and then it'll cast it off. And then the wolf will yawn, and it will look around, and then it will just trot off, and it will never think about that rabbit again or come back to the same field or, keep in a cycle of that specific scenario. And the rabbit will eventually, if it's collapsed, it will eventually sense by sense come back online. So first it will do the minimal amount of movement, like moving by its nose, then it will open its eyes, then it will let its eyes move around. If it's still all coast clear, then it'll let its ears move around, then it will come up vertical in gravity, then it will do the same thing again to look around to make sure, okay, coast is clear, then it will shake and it will have a full discharge until all of the energy that it couldn't flee or fight with is out of its system, and then it will just hop away. And it's not going to like think about the wolf or be afraid of wolves or not go in the field again. It's just going to live its rabbit life and do its thing. So, but as humans, there's a lot of reasons why we get stuck. And some of those are because we get embarrassed. Like if someone were to see us fall down, or if you're in let's say a compromising situation where you've got your shirt off and you would like to yell because you'd like to get out of the situation, but you think some part of you is like, yeah, but if I do this and someone comes, then they're going to see me like this. And so you're making calculations about how to protect yourself from shame, but how to protect yourself from a different kind of harm. So I help people complete those. So we spend a lot of time talking as humans. We spend a lot of time, I don't know if Swedes do this, but Americans spend a lot of time in therapy. Social media has all kinds of psychoanalysis available on it and all kinds of diagnoses. And people are really self-diagnosing a lot. I work below that structure. So it's not that it's not relevant. I'm not a psychologist. I have no psychological training beyond being an American that's been psychoeducated because it's our new monotheism. But I'm working below that. So it's very frustrating. I'm sure most people listening can relate. I can definitely relate too. It's very frustrating to know what your patterns are and not be able to change them. So you're like, yeah, well, I know I'm like this because my mom was really like this and my dad was really like this. And then when I was this age, this happened. And then I had this surgery and da-da-da-da-da. But in life, the same things are still happening. You're still in a certain bandwidth of energy. You're still collapsing, or you're still overworking, or whatever it is. It's very frustrating if you know why you're doing all of the things you're doing, but you still can't change them.
Right, you've done the therapy, but you have sort of figured out some sort of narrative about what it is you're doing, but you still can't make a new pattern. Which
is important to have a narrative. I mean, that we're meaning-making creatures. Like, that's important. It's just that it's imprisoning as well. And oftentimes there's a lot that's happening. We can call that, let's call that just the social body, or we can call it the social nervous system. And that's what it's called in polyvagal theory. That's when we're comparing ourselves to each other and it's fitting in and fawning, and it disproportionately impacts women. So it makes sense that we're talking a lot about it. But if we go below that, we have the animal body. And if we are in the power of the animal body, it just supersedes the social. It's like it doesn't matter as much what anyone thinks about what we're doing. We're not continually pulled by comparison or what our social scripts have been, because we just feel an inherent sense of comfort in ourselves, or an inherent sense of power. So we're not constantly trying to second guess what we say or wonder if we're doing the right thing. We just have a connection to instinctual drive.
Yeah. So in relation to that, what do you think is, the most important things that people need to know about the nervous system, including the social nervous system that you just mentioned, which was kind of a new thing for me when I was reading your work, which was very interesting.
Okay.
And that women in particular are maybe more sensitive to the social nervous system.
Okay. Well, as you know, I've written a whole books on this, so
yeah, I realized that
people can just go read the first chapter of Call of the Wild, which is free at KimberlyAnnJohnson.com/chapter. I'll try to do my best, but I'm really good at simplifying this, and the book simplifies it in a lot of ways, but it's also really important. There are very simple principles that are the foundation of understanding one's nervous system. The first thing that I think is extremely important to know is that it is a real thing. So it's not an abstraction. It's not a theory. It's, if you dissect a body, you find nerve structures. Our nervous system is made of nerves. So our chakra system is an energy system. Chinese medicine, meridians, that's spaciousness. So if you look at a dissection, you're not going to see a meridian. You'll see the space where the meridian might be going, but you can't see it. But the nerves you can see. Gil Hedley just did an entire nerve section and went all over the United States with a nerve tour. So it is a palpable physical thing. I don't know the words in Swedish, but in English we have lots of phrases like, I'm frazzled, my nerves are frazzled. That's a real thing. If your myelin sheaths on your nerve structures are threadbare or exposed, then you're going to feel that. And they're encased in fascia, and that there's all kinds of composition that impacts that. People might listen and go well, who cares? Well, it's important because it's it's structure just as much as bones are structure. We think, oh, bones, skeleton. Okay, bones are real. Yeah, but nerves are also just as much of a real system. Bones are living things as well. So how our nerves are positioned, you can touch nerves and you can move nerves. It's a possible thing to do. And how they live inside of us and how they're moving is a part of how our nervous system is. So I always like to emphasize that, because like right now, if you just, your brain is part of your nervous system as well. If you think about how your brain is sitting on your tentorium inside of your skull, and you, at first, your mind will go to a visualization. It will go to a picture of a brain. But if you let go of that visualization and you go into your own body, you can locate your brain. It's a location function. It's not an imagination function. It's as if you could also do this with your cervix. Like, you may know what a picture of the cervix looks like, but can you perceive your own cervix? Do you know where it is? You might think you know where it is, but then you go to get a cervical exam, or right now you're like, oh, hold on, can I feel without my hands? That's palpation. That's another way of feeling. But can I feel my own cervix? Do I know where it is relative to my vaginal opening? Do I know where it is right to left in my body? So the brain might be tipping forward. Like if you think about those games you have with the marble on a wooden piece and you roll the wood around to get the marble to go places, you have a tentorium that's about at the bridge of your nose line, which is a somewhat of a shelf for part of your brain. Your brain might be tilting to the left. Your brain might be tilting back. Your brain might be tilting towards your forehead. But if you just do the location function, your body will sort it towards the most optimal placement. So the more direct and the less interpretive that we can be with the nervous system, the more impactful it will be. Because then we're not putting a label on it. We're letting the structure actually organize to what's the most adaptive for whatever situation that we're in. So that's one of them. Okay, so social nervous system. Again, this is a little easier when people can see me visually, because I can help them sort, because there's a lot of vocabulary that's involved, and some of the vocabulary is a little bit counterintuitive. But most people in American education, they learn that the nervous system works like this. You've got sympathetic, which is fight or flight, and you've got parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. That's a mix and match. That's a misunderstanding. So that already starts off with a lack of understanding of how our nervous system responds when we have a sense of safety, and how our nervous system responds when we're under threat. Our most primitive system is our parasympathetic system. And when it is safe, it's responsible, and this is the dorsal system. So it's the oldest embryologically and evolutionarily. Other organisms besides humans have it. So when we're safe in our parasympathetic system, then that's when resting and digesting happens. That's where sphincters open, so dilation and childbirth. That's a sense of stillness or hibernation or calm. That's what happens in all the things you do in the cave are part of the parasympathetic system. Then in the sympathetic system, when you have a sense of safety, that's when you have direction, you have a healthy sense of drive or aggression, you know what you want. So that's the predator side of the system. People think that the sympathetic is only bad, it's only fight or flight, but that's like the pushing phase of labor. The sympathetic is your inhalation. The parasympathetic is your exhalation. The
there needs to be a balance.
It wakes you up in the morning. The parasympathetic slows you down at night. For women, the sympathetic is between the bleed and the ovulation, and the parasympathetic is from ovulation to bleed. In a life cycle, there's places where there's more activation and places where there's more deactivation. So when we're under threat, then that's when you have in the sympathetic the fight, which is to move towards a threat, or the flight, to move away from the threat. Or in the parasympathetic, you have the freeze response when you're under threat, or the collapse, which is what I was describing earlier. So the rabbit couldn't do the flight, so then it went into the freeze, and then it went into the collapse. Conditioning is a part of this. Connective tissue is a part of this. Personal life stories are a part of this. There's oftentimes siblings that'll polarize. So like one sibling will be more flight oriented and the other more fight oriented. And generally, each of them also correlates with emotional structures. So a fight response emotionally at a low level is irritation, frustration, anger, rage, or annihilation in degree of response. Load high. The flight is fear, panic, terror. So what does this mean? It means if you're fearful a lot, then you're having incomplete flight responses. That's what it's telling you. If you're angry a lot, it's telling you, oh, there were times in my life earlier where I felt trapped or unable to express, and all of that energy is underneath this. And then in the freeze, the emotional correlates are disorientation, confusion, helplessness, apathy, resignation. So that's what's happening in basically the sympathetic system rules the limbs, because that's what you would fight or flee with. The parasympathetic dorsal, which is what I've been talking about, is subdiaphragmatic, so it's in the organs. And then you have the newest of the systems, which is called it's a part of the parasympathetic system, but it's ventral, which means the front of the body, the ventral vagal system. That system is the most recent, and it evolved for maternal bonding. So it evolved for the 18-inch breastfeeding distance and the way that a baby can read a mom's expressions around her eyes and her mouth, and the noises and the ways that we're communicating to them what their experience is, because they're learning what their experience is through how we're mirroring their experience back to them. So because of that, it disproportionately impacts females, because it's an estrogenous oxytocin circuitry. Of course, it affects all humans, but we can see this very clearly, and the research also has come to bear this even after my book, that females are disproportionately impacted by social media, for instance, and especially females at adolescence, because our comparison function is so intense. And so because social media is so fast, it's giving us even more chances to compare, like, I'm this, I'm not this, I belong, I don't belong. So when we're safe in the social nervous system, we feel like we can be ourselves and still belong. We feel like, we can earn more money than everyone else in our family and we'll still be accepted, or we can earn way less and still be accepted, or we can wear red lipstick when no one else does and it's fine, or we can vote differently than everyone else and we're still a part of the group. But on the flip side, when we're not safe there, we have the function of fitting in, which is camouflaging. So just kind of don't stand out, don't say anything different. At a high level, it's imposter syndrome. And then we have the fawning feature, which is when you get closer to the threat. So you get really nice and you don't have any need, you sublimate your needs and you just replicate whatever it is that the person who has the power is what you think they want or what they do want. So the fawning response is what is responsible for most of the Me Too situations. The desire for repetition. So we talked earlier about incomplete cycles. So when we're doing those things or life is giving us the same situation, of course it's never the same because it's later on, but repetitive things, we often feel like that's a punishment or that we've done something wrong, which is why it's happening again. But what is actually happening is our nervous system is looking for repair. So it's giving us an opportunity to complete the circuit. It's taking us back there so that we have an opportunity to do something with a higher level of efficiency and a higher level of overall system coherence and integrity.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So maybe we're also somehow seeking that in order to have unconsciously seeking those situations in order to be handling them in a better way, or able to.
The nervous system is doing it. You can call it the unconscious
nervous system,
and it's also. But I mean, that some people might say that's the same thing. But I mean, when you start working this way, or you start observing it, there's people that like get in a car accident at the exact same stop sign that their family member died at, or like even geographically, our bodies are like homing pigeons, like trying to go to the place to have that opportunity to be able to shift something into more integration.
Okay, so that was a really helpful summary. And so in the work that you're doing, you're really helping people who have been stuck at various points of those threat responses to find a way through that. And you're saying that healing really starts with the body.
Yeah, I mean, all of us have interrupted cycles. It's just part of being an incarnate person. Yeah. The people that find themselves their way to me generally are having either a physical pain that they can't figure out, and it's not shifting with biochemical solutions or biomechanical solutions usually. Or they know, like, I've never been the same since I had a baby, and I can't figure out how to put myself back together again. Or I used to like sex in this way, or I've never liked sex and now it's important to me and I want help with this kind of thing.
Yeah. So could you just say, I know it's hard to summarize, but could you say something about what a path of healing in this way could look like? Just an example.
I mean, the way that I first came up with calling something activate your inner jaguar, the jaguar has a lot of different meanings inside of my work, which was primarily that when I used to live in Brazil. My daughter's father's Brazilian. She was born in Brazil. And when she was around 5, I was parenting her alone. And we went on a vacation and we were with a bunch of other adults. And everybody was saying, should we get pizza or sushi? And all the adults wanted pizza, I think, and she wanted sushi, and she got her way. And I thought that the other adults would kind of like step in. But later my friend said, you're really going to need to get a handle on this because you're raising a really authoritarian kid, which of course made me really furious at her. But I also thought she was a really good friend and figured she was putting our friendship on the line to give me this feedback. So I went to my somatic experiencing practitioner, who is a man, and he said to me, I was telling him I was feeling really sorry for myself, and I was saying like, oh, it's just so exhausting being a single mom and like doing the unconditional love and also doing the discipline. And he just looked at me and said like, did you know that I'm from the Amazon? He said in Portuguese, "Você sabia que eu sou da Amazônia?" And I was like, no, he didn't. He looked like a city person. He didn't look like someone I thought was from the Amazon. He said, I'm from Acre, and you're a jaguar. Você é uma onça. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, look at you. Look at your golden skin and your spots, because I have freckles. And he said, it's the mothers that teach the cubs to hunt. And so in that moment, he just fractured that idea that I had, that it's like dad is discipline and mom is unconditional love. And he just said, you need to go and watch videos of jaguars parenting their cubs, and you need to get on the ground and you need to start wrestling with her and playing like the jaguars do. And so I did that, and I started holding her down and pinning her and like really physically showing her that I was in charge, and that like, we could play back and forth and I wasn't hurting her or anything, but I was really giving her a very strong sense of containment. And also like there was no controversy about who was the stronger one when it came to being on the floor together. So I came to the States. I started doing this work in the dome, which is where I worked when I was doing all these sessions. And this woman came to a session and she was wearing like 4 layers, and it's pretty warm in Southern California, and it was warm inside my dome, and she's wearing a hat and sunglasses. So I joked with her. I was like, wow, are you like famous? Are you incognito? Like what's happening? She's like, oh yeah, I'm cold all the time. And all my friends tell me, they say the same thing. I'm always wearing like 2 more layers than everybody. So that already gave me a clue that she was probably in a freeze response a lot of the time, because if you're cold all the time, you're probably having a freeze response of some sort. And then also that's how she felt protected, to have a sunglass and all these layers on. And she started telling me that, like, I had my 3rd kid and I don't even want to be next to my husband, and there's nothing wrong with him, and I want to be next to him, but I'm so energetically sensitive. I don't even really want to go out of my house, and I don't know what's going on, and I can't go running, because if I go running and there's like a homeless person that asks me something, I feel like I've got to stop and talk to that person. And so I was really fascinated, and I thought, okay, well, she's already in the rabbit mode. She's completely like curled in and covered and trying to hide. So maybe she'd want to be the wolf. So that's what I said. Hey, would you like to be the wolf and I'll be the rabbit? And because I work physically. And right when I said that, she just started to cower. She just got down in a crunched down position. And she's like, I don't know what's happening. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And so in that session, she just went into like an ice sculpture position, and I went and stood beside her, and I, slowly talked to her and just said, yeah, this is normal. And, you're in a deep freeze, and your body is doing it, and it will come out, but we just have to be patient. And I'm here with you while this is happening. And so she's like, I could move, but like my body doesn't want to move. I'm like, totally, like, we're just going to wait, and we're going to wait to see when it is that your body does want to move. So that was a huge aha for me, because I realized, okay, it's not that she doesn't want to be the wolf. She actually can't be the wolf. And so I took her through 6 sessions of eventually learning how to zigzag, to stalk like a predator stalks, learning how to build power on all 4s. And, you can't do that all at one time. Otherwise, everybody could just go join a gym and be jiu-jitsu people or box or whatever. So I had to take her step by step. And she originally had come wanting internal work, but we both realized that after those 6 sessions, like that, our work together for that period of time was complete, because she came in the next session after that saying that she had gone for a run for the first time in like, I don't know how long, a while, and that she was sitting next to her husband on the sofa, like touching. And so like step by step in her own life, she was feeling like, okay, I'm like coming out of whatever this thing was. And I don't think she ever knew exactly why she entered that state. The 3rd birth wasn't particularly difficult or traumatic. Yeah. She was a very sensitive person, like a lot of the people that I work with are, and I think increasingly more people all over the world are, because of just existential dread and environmental thresholds and all other kinds of reasons. But that was one example.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting, because I think it also points out this thing when she said that, well, I could move, but my body doesn't want me to move. And that there is this knowledge that the body has about what it is that we need to be doing, that just we also can't really explain rationally, because that's what's so interesting about this work. It seems like we can heal things even when we don't know what has caused it, because that's often, we might think, oh, I have no reason to feel stressed in this situation. I haven't really suffered any particular trauma. Why am I feeling this? Why am I experiencing this? But there actually is a way that we can resolve that without necessarily knowing what it's about.
Definitely. Sometimes we need to know. Like the psyche just won't let us rest until we know. Yeah. But we can't force ourselves to know either. The conditions have to be right in order to know. And we need to have a real light touch with that, because for a lot of these things, it's like they don't want strobe lights. They need like the softest of light, and just they need to know, because when we enter into these things with a fix it, we're already in sympathetic energy. And that sympathetic drive to fix is the fastest thing to have that whatever is needing support or some kind of presence just kind of goes back into its corner. And so most of the time people want to ask the question why, but I'm always asking the question, what? What are you noticing? What's happening now? It's a sequencing question and a rhythm question. And we can get very good at noticing our own responses and naming them, and also deciding which direction we want to go with them. And it's often necessary to have somebody else there. It doesn't have to be a practitioner for everything, but some of the things, the ruptures were happening in disconnection, and so some of the things need some connection or witnessing in order to be able to shift.
Another thing that you talk quite a lot about is pleasure and feeling good as a way to healing. What has made you come to that conclusion?
Well, I didn't come to it. It's actually a part of somatic experiencing training, very much a part of sexological bodywork, but it's not, it sounds like it is a philosophy, but it's actually physiology. If you are always in what's wrong attention, which is you're always noticing everything that's wrong because your system is wired to the threat. So you feel that you're in danger all the time, even if you're sitting in a room that's beautiful, that you can see all around you and that has many beautiful things in it, but you don't feel safe. Then you are just retrieving information continually that reinforces that. In any situation, it could be the worst birth you've ever heard of, which I've heard I've been at some really bad ones, and I've also heard some really bad ones. But there's always something that was quote unquote good. There's always some person that was there or some image that appeared. And I can never help someone unless they can get out of what's wrong attention every once in a while. So in the language, we call it blue. We just assign the color blue for what's pleasurable and red for what's not pleasurable. People get really caught up on this, because then they think, oh, well, you're just avoiding, you're just Pollyanning, and you're just, glossing over what's bad. Most of us are focused on what's bad and what's wrong much more than we're focused on what's right. And that Pollyanna thing, when people are like, oh, well, look on the bright side, or, well, at least da-da-da-da-da, that's false blue. That's not real blue. Right. So in order that we can repair anything, we always have to have some degree of ability to be present to things that feel good. And that could be the smallest thing. Like that could be like the sensation of your fingers touching one another. It could be the light that's coming in on your face. It could be the memory of the smell of something. But we have to be able to be here. And here is a little complex. But, we have to come home to the body, and we have to have an ability to stretch out how long we can stay with something that's pleasurable. So I call it landing blue. And I don't even think I made that up. I think that came from something called organic intelligence from Steve Hoskinson. I'm pretty sure that that's where that language came from. Mm-hmm. So if you imagine a figure eight, and you imagine a figure eight that a part of it is small and the other part is big. What happens when we just begin is that the part that's big is everything that's wrong. And then we go in the figure eight like it's second to what's right. And then we go back to what's wrong. So my job is always to help someone stretch the blue just a little bit longer, just wrestle that bone out of their mouth a little bit more, and then let them go. And eventually the system wants to be at least evenly in those two sides. So it becomes self-organizing, but at first we really have to practice. We really have to practice there the mind goes again, or there's my awareness. I'm like, what is it that keeps taking me there? And how do I keep stretching something that feels good. And we have so many excuses for why not to feel good.
Yeah, and it feels like unless we can know what feeling good feels like, or landing in blue, as you called it, it must be hard to even begin to work with what is challenging, or to work with the red, because we also just don't know.
Well, you can't.
But
the thing is, as a practitioner, it's your biggest challenge, because if people are coming to pay you money, they're coming to solve their problem. They're not paying you money to sit and feel good. So like when they feel good, they're like kind of looking at you like, so you have to convince them, and you have to trick them.
Yeah. And
you have to find ways. I mean, I had a really hard client, and it was so challenging. Like, I just was doing everything. I was like putting on music that I liked, because it was like she didn't know what kind of music she liked. So I was like, okay, well, I'll put on something that I like. And, just anything to try to orient towards eros and life force, and like that which is generative. And I tell everyone individually and in my classes, it's like so much more of us is working than not working for us to even be sitting here upright.
Right.
Like, I mean, it's a miracle. It's a miracle.
It's a miracle that we work most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So to even be able to be listening to a conversation like this, it's like there's actually so much that's beautifully orchestrated and has been up to this point.
Yes. And you mentioned eros and life force. And so thinking about the erotic and about sex, what is it, this perspective that you're coming from based on everything that you've learned with also working with so many women? What has that taught you about sex, and maybe what do we really need to understand about sex that most people are not understanding?
Well, most women that I work with, almost all of them know that sex is like a very powerful place. And they know that there's kind of like a hidden treasure chest there that they've had the key to maybe once or twice, but they don't know how to get in there regularly. Right. So it's really important. I mean, there's so many things, but one of them is that sexuality is evolving. So most of our image of what good sex or being sexy or how we want to be in our sexuality is just informed by youth and the maiden version of sexuality. And so when we become mothers or even enter just a more mature phase, we're always thinking about loss and what isn't anymore, what we had and what we don't have. And the challenge of learning how to articulate an evolving need when something that used to feel good doesn't feel good anymore. When something that we used to be able to rely on isn't there, then how do we move forward? And that's true. I mean, I'm postmenopausal now, so I've gone through the next level of threshold of a real rearrangement of how my own eroticism works and what feels good and doesn't feel good. And, because I work in this area, I really thought, oh, this is never going to happen to me. Like, this is going to be a breeze. Mm-hmm. And it was actually super challenging mm-hmm. and confronting in a lot of different ways. So I think that's one thing. I mean, this is what my next book is about the evolution of women's sexuality across the erotic seasons. Mm-hmm. But that's a big one. It's just that without knowing it, we swim in the soup of how male arousal works. So male arousal is typically, an arousal means engorgement to tissue. So again, it's not conceptual. It's very literal. Like, a penis with erectile tissue can get erect in 30 seconds to a minute, but a vulva needs at least 35 to 45 minutes for full arousal and erection.
Mm-hmm. Real discrepancy.
Yeah, it's very different. Mm-hmm. And it's also not very known.
No.
So when there's really no one to blame. It's like, if nobody knows that, then how can they proceed? So I've often said, I love the book Women's Anatomy of Arousal by Sherry Winston. And I've often said I want to Xerox this one chapter and like put it in every cafe in the world. Because it's like, if people just knew that was the case, a lot of women are having penetrative sex without being fully aroused. Yeah. And many people are like they've never even they're having painful sex, or they've decided they don't like sex because, like, imagine always having sex with a dick that's not totally hard. It would be unsatisfying and probably wouldn't end up in orgasm. So that's really important to know, that it's the thing that we've been calling foreplay isn't really optional, and it actually isn't really separate from sex.
Yeah, and
so
also the word foreplay, that it's something before the real thing.
Yeah.
When it's actually just as much the real thing.
Yeah. So, sex without a goal, there's so much to say about it, but to be more succinct, I think it's just that women know that there's like a real part of their soul path that lives inside finding this key to this treasure chest. And then it's very mysterious how to respect our life phases and our evolving needs, and still tend to that eroticism, because there's times in life, especially when we have like hormonal flush, when it's like so close to the skin, and it's like our desire for something can be very compelling and driving. But where I'm at right now, at least right now, and it's not the same for everyone, of course, but for me, I'm 51, almost 51, and I've been in menopause for 2 years. So I'm postmenopausal. And I really have to remind myself, like, that it's important to me. Like look in this direction. And it's kind of like, if you were to light a match and throw it on gas, that's sort of how my drive used to work. It was just there all the time. It was sort of like unleash the snake, and I could just make anything happen. And I liked that power. It was fun. And I didn't even know how much I was orchestrating all the time. Mm-hmm. And then now it's like, okay, I've left a bonfire on the beach. The embers are out, and I'm going back there, and it's like, I've got to keep blowing on it. And then, like, if my husband has to, like, take a shower or something, I'm like, dude, are you sure you want to do that right now? Because, like, I'm not really sure when you get back, I'm going to be awake or I'm going to care. You know what I mean? So I know there's a lot to learn in this phase where you can't rely on hormones for all of the charge. And I just think, when you get a group of women together, it's not that often that we have the opportunity either to have like real in-depth conversations about our sexuality. It's mostly pretty superficial, like how many times a week, or what do you like? It's not like, what are you exploring in your sexuality? Like, what part of you is it touching? What part of you is it not touching? Yeah. And then also, I really like to orchestrate situations like sexuality salons where women can be with one another in their erotic energy. So there's not even males in the space. It's like just women with other women in ourselves, and deciding that, there's lots of different ways to orchestrate that. But when I'm on retreat with women, that's what I like to move towards. It's not always possible because it's just so delicate. It's so tender, and there's so much that we bring there. So there's a lot that has to happen to be able to get to that place where that's something that's evocative and generative and well held. But I do think it's extremely powerful and necessary.
Do you feel like eroticism and sexuality are interchangeable, or could you say something otherwise about how you perceive the difference between those two?
I'm not really sure.
I'm thinking, from my perspective, it seems like that the erotic can be present in so much without necessarily being sexual per se. But I would be interested to hear if you have any thoughts on how we can bring, more erotic energy into our lives in a healthy way. Because it feels like sexuality is such an incredibly powerful force. That's why it's being used to sell us stuff all the time, or that's why it has this power over our imagination, which can be used in very unhealthy ways. But we can also use it in a very beautiful and healthy way for healing, or for connection?
What's interesting, there is that sex sells is kind of a trope. Yeah. It does and it doesn't. It's whenever I am teaching, I never use the word sex. I only use the word sexuality. People don't come if it's just the word sex because it's scary. Yeah. And sexuality is a little bit softer. Mm-hmm. I agree that there can be things that are erotic without necessarily being sexual. Maybe for some people, the erotic has more to do with sensuality than sexuality. But in my work, there are people that feel very comfortable with sensuality and not with sexuality. And there are people who feel very comfortable with sexuality and not with sensuality. And so I'm working to bridge those two for people so that they can have the kind of sexuality that they want, not because I have some agenda for people, but mostly people are looking for more spiritual, embodied, transcendent, exciting sex. So I'm trying to help them kind of open the buffet to like what's the toolkit for how you compose that? I think it's important to talk about touch because touch is a human need. It's mammalian. There's no way around it. And we've developed cultures where it's contentious to touch someone. And it's complex because, of course, there's the cultural elements to it, shaking hands versus hugging versus kissing someone on the cheek. When I moved here from Brazil, I was used to the Brazilian way. In Rio, you kiss each cheek. And where my husband's from, you smell someone's neck. You say a cheiro and a beijo. So you sniff their neck and then you kiss them on the cheek. It's like feels so good. And when I came back to the US, I was like so weird. I was like hugging everyone. I didn't want to lose that because I loved it so much. But I knew I would lose it because I knew the longer I was here, there's no way I could keep it up and be the only person doing it. And now, the last time I went to Brazil, someone went to shake my hand. I was like, oh my God, this is so weird. Because, the West just finds a way to predominate. But it's essential that we touch each other and find ways to be touched. And I don't know how committed people are to that.
Right. Well, it's interesting. During the pandemic, I was wondering, is this it now? We're not going to hug anymore? Are people just going to not even do the handshake, but the elbow nudge? But luckily, it seems like our need for touch and closeness has, at least we're back to, being okay with shaking hands and hugging. But it's very different than in other cultures, as you say. It's contentious.
My own dad won't change like my niece's diaper, and he raised 2 daughters and changed tons of diapers. But because of, it's like men won't get in elevators with women because they're afraid of being accused of something. And so it's just safer for them. And so this idea of safety being like preserve your personal boundaries and your personal space, and that everything is about that all the time is not going to be conducive to a lot of closeness.
Yeah.
And so I think that, does eroticism have to include touch? I don't know, but I wish that it included more of it.
Yeah. What do you think is, or do you want to say something about where you think people can begin if they're longing for more connection and intimacy in their sexuality?
I think it starts with tracking pleasure and then being willing to notice. There's a few directions one could go. There's a book called The Erotic Mind by Jack Morin, and he talks about identifying your core erotic theme. And essentially what that is like looking back on memories that stick with you that are really erotic, and they might be sexual and they might not. And then you write about them, and you write them in detail. So you like really like get into like what was the day like and what happened before it and what happened after and what was it about it. And then you write about 3 of them, and then you leave them, and then you come back to them like another day or 2, and you read them again, and you kind of look for similarities between them. And after a while, you can kind of see like, oh, a lot of people have something to do with nature. Some people have something to do with like a threesome. Some people have something like it was funny. There was one person in my training who was a sex worker and like super non-monogamous in the way that they live their life, but their core erotic theme was actually monogamy.
Oh, interesting.
Mine has to do with being seen in all the different kinds of ways that you could be seen, whether that's photographed or in a mirror or, all different kinds. And it tends to be that the core erotic theme is related to something that's reparative from childhood. At least that's what Dr. Morin's studies led to. I think it's like a lot of things, just when you put your attention to it, it already starts to shift. But then noticing like what's exciting and where are the ways that you're coloring inside the lines, and what are the lines you'd rather color outside of. And then I love The Wheel of Consent by Betty Martin. There's a lot of free content at her website, bettymartin.org. And it's a framework for exchange. So there's 4 quadrants: give, receive, take, and allow. And you practice those. And so you really turn these dynamics that can be so complex of like, you know, who's this really for? I'm giving you what I think you want. You're giving me what I think I want, but neither of us really want it, but we don't really know what else to do and how to talk about it. There's a lot of really good resources there of building those skills of practicing and breaking things down.
Yeah, because it's like you say, based on what we were talking about previously, when we can start to know our bodies and recognize, well, does this feel good or not? That's sort of also a prerequisite to, and stay true to that, even in ways that we're perhaps not accustomed to. Then we can just, it's like kind of like a thread. Like once you can pick out the tiniest thread of that pleasure, and then you can start continuing to pull on it and follow it, and it can sort of lead to unexpected places.
Yeah, if the good thing about the Wheel of Consent is you play something called the 3-minute game. So all of your requests are just for 3 minutes.
Right.
So it's low stakes, and it's not going anywhere, because once the timer goes off, you respect the timer, and then that's it. Yeah. So people generally feel like the people who are in situations where they're like, I don't even want to do X because then I have the expectation it's going to go here, and I don't want to deal with that expectation. So I'd rather just not do anything at all. It kind of breaks that apart. And it also breaks up the transactional nature of sex, which is like, you do me, I do you, this whole thing about orgasm equality. And like, you know, I go down on you, you go down on me, you come, I come. That's what success looks like. It just breaks that apart, because you might do one day a half an hour, and the same person might receive 6 times in a row. And then the next day, the other person gets to decide what they want to do. So you take it out of this realm of like every interaction has to produce something or go somewhere type of thing.
Yeah. You have a really nice distinction as well in your book about hot sex versus warm sex. Do you want to say something about that?
Sure. Yeah. Again, I don't think I came up with that. I'm not sure where I learned it, but hot sex is more adrenalized. So it's more based on power. It's usually faster. And warm sex is based on the oxytocin circuitry. So it's generally slower, more meandering. You know, a woman's arousal trajectory is generally more wave-like. A male arousal trajectory can really kind of be sharp and steep. So I like to say that it's just nice to have a choice. Most people have only ever had one or the other, and it could be correlated to that sexual, sensual thing not necessarily, but it might be. But it's nice to know that you know how to dial it up or dial it down or enter into a realm. Because warm sex is the kind of sex where you can orgasm and you can have just extended massive orgasms for hours and hours. Hot sex is really going to be, you're going to hit it and it's going to be done generally.
And it seems like that's maybe the kind of sex that we're mostly focused on or like when people
it's what we see
in our culture. And when people think of sex, that's what they think of.
It's what's seen. I don't recall the only movie that I can recall seeing warm sex in at the moment. I'm sure there's many others. Well, not many, but some is I think it's called Portrait of a Woman on Fire.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And that's women with women. So it makes sense that it's more, not that women always get it right, but it makes sense that sex that's less goal oriented with two vulvas is going to be more slower. Yeah. I think that when it comes to sex, most people are pretty caring and wanting the other person to experience pleasure.
Yeah.
And my experience, I've worked with mostly women, and women are always like, can you talk to my husband or can you talk to my boyfriend? And my experience with that has been that most of the time when women really get good at talking about what they want and showing what they want, that men are very willing to follow. So I do occasionally talk with the men, but it usually gets sorted out once women's own signals are coherent and once they're getting out of the fawning and out of the like, I just want this, or I'm just doing this repetitive thing that I had one client that she was always putting on lingerie and high heels and having her husband penetrate her from behind, but it was hurting her. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, do you think he would still want it if he knew it was hurting? She's like, no. So I was like, well, so why are you still doing it? And it was like, she hadn't even thought of that though. It was just so unconscious that until I asked the question, once I asked it, she was like, you're right. Why am I still doing it? But it was just, probably that position doesn't require very much intimacy because you can't see the other person's face for the most part. And it was easier to just keep doing that than to claim something else that she might want or move out of that specific kind of performance.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to mention about sex or this topic that we've been talking about right here? I have some other things I wanted to ask you, but I want to ask you before we leave this theme.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm curious what you think because you're a new mom.
Yeah.
So how has that transition been for you?
I think it's kind of like you said about coming into menopause. It's definitely hormonally different being a mom and breastfeeding and just being in a very different space. In general, it feels like motherhood opens up things for me in my body. So I think that once this very early phase where, the night feeding and the breastfeeding is kind of intense, once that starts to ease off a little bit, I'm interested to see what changes have happened in my body. Also, because I haven't started menstruating again. So I'm just not in a cycle, which also feels weird. Mm-hmm. I think that's good for the time being. But it's also weird not having that thing that paces me in the month. Mm-hmm. So it kind of feels like a suspended time.
Mm-hmm. There's a book written by an Argentinian therapist that was in English translated to say maternity, coming face to face with your own shadow. Mm. And in that book, she talks about the postpartum time as the feminization of sex, and meaning that it's a time where female pleasure has to be at the center. Mm. And so if it never has been prior, it's such a big rhythm shift because generally penetration isn't someone's first desire. And so
after childbirth.
Yeah. I mean, that's not true for everyone. For some people it is.
But especially after a vaginal birth, it's just things need time to...
Well, even after a cesarean delivery, like a lot of times after a cesarean, there's an incomplete process of pushing.
Right.
And nothing has come out. So the idea of something coming in, the body's not going for it. But women are really confused because they're like, I didn't even birth a vaginal baby. Why is vaginal sex painful?
Right. Interesting.
So yeah, that was maybe now, because I had a baby 17 years ago, maybe now that's more in the culture than it was. But for me, when I read that, it was a real wake up call. Like, wow, okay, that makes sense. And no wonder it's so radical, because if you've never really considered that before, now it's like, you're in a weakened state because your energy system is so open, and then you're exchanging with another being. You're basically, their survival is based on what you're giving them. And then you really have to turn your attention to pleasure differently. And so one of my friends told me, when your baby's hand is on you, just really register like, that's my baby's hand. And then when your partner's hand is on you, just register like, that's my partner's hand. Because people say like, I'm touched out, or like, I'm already giving. But a partner's touch can be giving to you. Yeah. So I always say for postpartum sex, it's like, what is the sex that would feel like you're receiving, that it would give you energy? Because we're very conditioned as women to think that we're giving something through sex, like it's an offering or a gift that we're giving. We are not conditioned to think that it's a gift that we're receiving. Mm-hmm. So what is the sex that would give us energy? What's the sex that would feel resourceful in the dynamic that we're in?
Yeah. Well, and I'm very blessed to have a very patient and listening partner, which I know that even for women who are maybe very happy with their male partner, just the amount of patience and care and carefulness that I have needed at times, even just before having a baby, has been really surprising to me. And I was really, really sensitive to any kind of suggestion that my partner would be disappointed in that, but he never was. And so I think and that's such a gift for a male partner to not feel rejected by the needs of my body, because I didn't perceive them as my needs. So I also started talking, I think, about my needs as, this is what my body needs. It's not actually that I don't feel like I consciously need it. It's just my body is saying, we can't do this right now. And then I feel like that helps. It's not something that needs to be taken personally as a rejection. But I know for a lot of men, it's so hard. I mean, sex is so vulnerable. It's so hard.
And I think that it's okay that when people are disappointed and rejected.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just okay. Like, it just has to be. I mean, I've felt disappointed and rejected before. Yeah. I've had partners that don't want as much sex as I want. Yeah. I've had to disappoint before because I started something and then something shifted and I wasn't interested in the thing that I started anymore. And it was like, okay, well, that's just freaking life. Like, I'm not going to just go through these motions now. Like, that's not where we're at. Yeah. So I think, yes, it's great. But I also think it's really important that men listening and women listening too is like, there's a lot of, I hear a lot more from men who are not only understanding, but I would say overly understanding to a point that they've completely sort of dimmed their own arousal because women are so intimidated by male activation. Mm. And so I've worked with a lot of men that I'm like, it's absolutely okay to express that you have interest, and it's absolutely okay. Like, that doesn't make you a jerk. It doesn't, like, because you want sex. Yeah, like, that's fine. And actually, that's great. And I think as a single mom too, I had so many married women like complaining about their husbands wanting them. And I was at home just like, I wish someone would jump me right now. Like, what I would give to have a hard dick next to me, like anytime. But it's just like, that's part of maturing, is like, we don't all get what we want all the time. Mm-hmm. And we don't all have matched desires all the time. And there's going to be there's messiness if we're going to really go there.
Yeah. And so then that's where just communicating
is key? Or how do we handle our bodies having mismatched needs if we're in a relationship?
It's just such a huge question because it depends, and it's a nervous system question, a lot of it, because it depends on what you're coming to sex with and what you're coming to it for. A lot of people come to it as a stress reliever, and nobody really likes being on the opposite end of someone using it as a stress reliever. So if that's, if there's like unprocessed stuff that is looking to get dumped, it's better that gets dumped somewhere else, like on a run or jacking off first and then coming to the bedroom. There's just so much to say about it, but it's so personal, and sometimes, we're in relationships for all different reasons. There's so many different reasons why we partner with someone, and how we get our needs met in some areas and not others, and the phases and stages we go through with each other. It's a whole person endeavor if it's good. So that means that there's a lot of twists and turns, and we all, you go through phases that are just like really connected and really great. And then you go through phases where there's kinks in the hose and you're just like, wow, okay, we're going to have to find our way back. And we're going to both have to decide we want to find our way back. And, there's just so many different ways that goes. Yeah.
But to not be afraid of that necessarily, to know that there's possibilities of working through that.
Yeah. Every time I talk these days, like when I'm giving talks, I believe that if we really want to be having sex that changes the world, and that we're really committed to getting out of the polarity that so much of the culture is in, we're going to have to clean up how we talk about men. And we're going to have to clean up how, as women, we regard them. That it's just so acceptable for men and women to talk negatively about men and be like, men are dogs, like men just want one thing. Whatever one's personal story is about men that they've inherited or created, or some people fight with me and say, well, men gave me this story. There's just so many good men. And I love what Alison Armstrong says about women either being frog farmers or prince farmers. And like, we have the power to turn men into frogs or princes. And there's a lot of men that are really trying hard to meet us at an emotional level and trying to kind of figure out how to be respectful, but also how to give us what we want. And those we're not always sending clear signals on that.
No, definitely. I wanted to talk to you, or I wanted to ask you about, we've talked a lot about biology, and when I was growing up in my family, there was, among the men in my family, there's a big focus on like evolutionary biology and how it kind of decides all of our behavior and how we're sort of slaves.
Are you even like in a family of Darwinians or something, or like?
Well, a little bit, yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
On the one scientists?
Side, one of them is. Or yeah, a few of them are. And so, maybe they would feel that I'm unfairly describing them in this, but the way I felt it is that we're kind of slaves to our genes, and there's not really much room for maneuvering in that, and certainly no space for spirituality. And then
I didn't expect that to be no space for spirituality. So how does that go together with the?
Well, I guess it's just a materialist sort of view.
Okay.
That we're, the reality of bodies as they have evolved for survival. Mm. Sort of that's the point of it is survival. So there's not really there's not another layer to it in terms of spirit or meaning. It's the continuation it's the survival of the genes. That's why things happen. So I had that, and then I also politically came of age around feminists who were not talking at all about biology. They were very wary of it because of this biological determinism of, biology having been used to oppress women, to say like, oh, well, women, they're so hormonal, they obviously can't run countries, or they're for child rearing, etc. And I feel that it's maybe changing, but sort of still the same, that in general, feminists are wary of talking about biology. But in your work, I'm kind of seeing, you have the evolutionary biology, but married to spirituality and feminism. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
It's super fascinating. I have a lot of thoughts because it's, I guess the feminism that I'm closest to, I would call like a fourth wave feminism, which is like including pleasure and including female cycles as a part of how we move forward. Because, I mean, the female body is where a lot of the planetary imbalances show up. So we can't really talk about the female body right now without talking about like how infertility is an industry. That's a nervous system phenomenon. A healthy nervous system means you can go to the bathroom when you need to. You can fall asleep when you're tired. You can have an orgasm when you're turned on. And you could get pregnant because that would be the most functional thing around. But now there's not only is there an industry of infertility, but then there's a feminist agenda, which I completely don't align with, which is that extended reproduction is a right. So like you got to freeze your eggs and the government should pay for you to freeze your eggs because you should be able to have babies whenever you want because our biology is actually oppressing us. And so the answer to that is technology. I'm absolutely opposed to that because I don't think, number one, we know at all what we're doing. We're messing in places that are not supposed to be messed with. But number two, because it's another way to be completely out of sync of what we know to be reality. And I'm a devotee of reality, so that being a devotee of the female body is also being a devotee of reality. I am influenced by evolutionary biology. I don't think it's the whole story, but it's so interesting because in the worlds that I'm in, which is like the sexological bodywork world, the trauma world, the birth world, it's completely contested that evolutionary biology is even a thing. So it's like you just choose your gender and you just completely take out the woman and the femaleness, and you try to imagine that none of this matters and that it's all just a matter of volitional choice. It's all just a matter of like what we feel and how we're interpreting what's happening in the body. The way that people just want to negate what's happening in the female body for so many different reasons is really appalling. And I wanted my second book to be the subtitle to say how women heal trauma. My publisher didn't want to publish a book with the word woman in the title. It's like, it's the female body. It's because my literal hands are in this territory. I see we're not built for stress the way male bodies are built for it. We're just not. And why did I went into menopause basically early because I've been working really, really hard for the last 15 years and raising a kid by myself in a modern culture without a village. And I love my work. So I'm completely creatively driven and I want to do a bunch, but my body can't keep up with that. And that's true of most of the women that are around me that are, have kids and relationships and a career. We really aren't built for it. And that's terrible because in our brain, we would love to think we are. Like, of course, I don't like that idea. Like, that makes me want to fight about it. Like, yes, we are. We can do it, but we can't. Testosterone is work fuel. And men have 20 times as much of it as we do. As far as the animal body part of it, I think it's interesting because I think when I say animal body, I am meaning instinct. But I'm also not saying that we don't have any choice in it or that there's not any way that we affect it.
And I think that's so interesting because I think that we, on the one hand, if we ignore our bodies, of course, that's kind of part of modern culture is to just pretend that our bodies don't exist. And I think that a lot of women are, that maybe kind of a little bit works until you, for example, have a baby. We're just like, okay, this totally doesn't work.
Well, and all the autoimmune conditions. I mean, autoimmune is 80% women. Autoimmune, one way you can look at it is it's a fight response. So aggression that should be going outward is turned inward, and then the body's fighting itself. Right. So we just reach these thresholds, and our cycles are part of the threshold. So, I think you're using the term blood rites or blood mysteries. Like, we have inbuilt rites of passage as women. That's why in most cultures, they don't design other rites of passage, because we already have it. But we're so invested, we being the collective North Americans, invested. Like, I just saw a thing today that made me want to tear my freaking hair out. That's like some scientist saying that at Yale, saying he's coming up with a way for women to never go through menopause.
Yeah.
Like with some kind of ovarian collection. I don't know if they're going to freaking re-inject us with eggs. I have no idea. But it's like, why? Why is everything about the female body wrong and a problem to be solved? Why is everything considered a symptom? Like, when I went to the doctor with a lot of things that were going on during this perimenopausal and menopausal time, the doctor looked at me and was like, "You're in perimenopause." I was like, "Dude, yeah, I know. That's why I'm here." It was like I was getting a cancer diagnosis. I was like, "Yeah, I mean, that's why I came here, to see if I could maybe eat something differently or like what I needed." I just wanted some orientation. But it's the pathologizing of women's health. And we're doing it to ourselves because we don't want to stop. We don't want to work at a different pace. We don't want to follow the ebbs and flows because it's not as satisfying. It's warm. It's a warm life. It's not a hot life. And we don't want any limits, right? Because that's infringing on the freedom of how we want to live our life and what we think even a good life is.
Yeah.
So I really talk to girls and women about it. Our female body is an incredible weather vane for all kinds of things. And I mean, it's hard because if you're sensitive, I mean, I missed my first period March 2020, and I lived in Brooklyn at the time. So I was in the center of the pandemic with sirens 24 hours a day. It was absolutely awful for 3 months. And at the end, when the shelter in place left, I got on a plane. JFK was there's only one wing of the airport that was open, and there was no lights. It was all dark. We got on a plane, my daughter and I, we came to San Diego. We literally touched down and I got my period. So I wasn't sure if I was going into spontaneous menopause because of just being so dialed on global stress, or if it was just that stress just kind of tipped me over the edge into this phase.
Wow.
But there's so much information for us
in our bodies.
Yeah. And also how two gene pools come together. If there's infertility, there's probably it's probably not a great idea.
Sorry, what's not a great idea?
That partnership.
Right.
If that, I mean, there's a reason, and I'm back in, and now I probably belong in your family, but it's if the DNA is not working, it's not working. I know
right, I see.
We're unhealthier than ever. And so people are doing all kinds of diets to be ready for preconception. But also I find that pleasure is completely absent from this conversation most of the time.
Yes.
I have friends that are doing IVF and I say, "Is there any reason to believe you couldn't get pregnant having sex?" "No." "Have you had any sex?" "Not for 2 years." So you're doing IVF to get pregnant, but you're not having any sex. I mean, how does that make sense? If you're not in the pleasure pathway, that is the generativity of what you're doing. But this is we live in this era of pieces and parts. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's maybe, as a close, it's the nervous system is holism. We're not pieces and parts. We can't just extract a hormone there and put in another thing there. The way that the nervous system is coordinated, it works as a unit. So we're always experiencing every level of reaction. It's like a soundboard. It just depends on what's dialed up and dialed down. And we're looking for a level of coherency between our body language, our vocal tone, our facial expressions, so that we're getting a response from either other people or from the world that's coherent to what we can have capacity to hold from the inside. And so that we can be also that we can be responsive to our environment and what's being asked of us, because there's just going to be more and more asked of us. Things aren't getting less complex. They're getting more complex. So that requires even more robustness to like, how can I still be present and aware and find joy and find beauty, even when the messaging is so intense about everything that's going wrong and all of the species that are dying and all of the things that aren't going to be possible soon. I think those things are concurrently true.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I do think that I think all humans are predisposed towards having ways of completing cycles, but I think females are specifically predisposed to that because we already have built-in cycles. So that means if we've had a pattern interrupt in a cycle, for instance, postpartum is analogous to menopause. So, and a bleed is analogous to postpartum, is analogous to menopause. So that means like if we've had some kind of a rupture in one of those places, we can repair it at those other phases. So people think about postpartum, we say 42 days for 42 years in Ayurveda. So what you put in the system in those 42 days is either going to take you and uplift you, like you can heal things because your system is so open and receptive, or if there's negativity that goes in, it could set it into your system for longer. But the more that we respect, for instance, like a lying in period for postpartum, the easier those later transitions will be. And if you say you had 3 children, and which there's a midwife, her name is Nauli Vinaver. She's Mexican, but she lives in Brazil, and she has had 3 children. And she's just jokes like, I'm a midwife and I should have done the lie-in and I didn't. But on her 3rd, she did. And she did the closing the bones at the right intervals. And she said that she felt better after that birth than she did after the first 2 because of the way that she respected closing her body and her energy back up. So we have these opportunities instead of thinking like, oh, it's just all accumulating and there's just more and more stuff that's getting stored up and backed up. That's partially true, but it's also true that we have these windows of opportunity where we're open to changing those foundational patterns. And so I think that's something that's why another reason why it's a rite of passage, because we can do these foundational re-imprintings at these threshold moments.
So the possibility of healing is, it comes back again, and it's real.
That's right.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, for coming in, having this conversation with me.
Thank you.
You'll find links to the things we talked about in the show notes. This was the 2nd episode of the Blood Mysteries series. If you haven't done so already, I recommend you to go back and listen to the previous episode where you'll hear the story behind the series and the interview with eminent fertility awareness expert Jenny Koos. I really want to stay in touch with you outside of Meta's grip, so please make sure to follow the show in your podcast app, or even better, sign up for the newsletter at forestofthought.substack.com, and you'll receive new episodes, essays, and events straight to your inbox. You can also provide deeply appreciated support for the show via Patreon or Substack. All the information is in the episode description. Take care, and I'll talk to you next time.